She didn't even let me finish handing it to her. "We only wear boutique," she said, lifting the sweater between two fingers like it was a used napkin. That was all. No thank you, no smile. Just those 5 words. I said nothing, just nodded, folded the sweater back, and placed it in the box I'd wrapped it in an hour ago with ribbon and care. Lily had been reaching for it. Her little hands paused midair, and she looked at her mother, then at me, uncertain. I smiled at her the way I always do, soft, steady, as if nothing had happened. The living room was full of expensive candles and glass decor that smelled like something I couldn't name. The couch cushions were too stiff to sit on, and the walls were empty except for a print that said "grateful" in gold letters. That word, floating above Karen's perfect blonde head, made me want to laugh or cry. "I appreciate the effort," Karen added, already turning away. She wore heels inside the house and clicked across the hardwood like the hostess of a magazine spread. Effort. I had stayed up 3 nights to finish the sweater. I chose the yarn from the farm shop, soft merino in a warm peachy color that reminded me of the blush on Lily's cheeks when she plays outside. I'd added little acorns along the hem. She used to collect them in a jar when she was 4. "Did you see what Grandma made?" I asked gently, crouching to Lily's eye level. She nodded. "It's really soft." But then Karen shot her a look, and Lily pulled her hands back like the wool was burning. "She doesn't need homemade, Martha," Karen said, still with that polite voice that made everything worse. "I'm sure you meant well." Of course I did. That's what people like me do. We mean well. We stay quiet. We make things. We wait for gratitude that never comes. It was snowing when I left their house. The kind of fine, persistent snow that slips into your collar and stays there. I walked carefully down their icy steps, the box clutched to my chest like something fragile. My car, the same Subaru I've driven for 12 years, looked out of place between their black SUV and the landscaper's shiny van. I sat inside for a while before starting the engine. Just stared ahead through the windshield. Their porch light stayed on. No one waved goodbye. I was 69 years old, and I had just been told, in the kindest way possible, that I didn't belong. At home, I didn't turn on the lights right away, just stood in the kitchen, holding the box. My hands were cold and stiff from the steering wheel, and I had the strange sense that someone had scolded me, like I was a child who brought the wrong thing to class. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight. Every drawer, every photo, every scratch on the table told stories no one asked about anymore. I placed the box on the kitchen counter next to the kettle. Then I took off my coat and stood there, rubbing my hands, trying to feel warm. The sweater was still inside, folded, untouched. I took it out slowly, spread it on the table. The stitches looked back at me like little secrets. I ran my fingers over the acorns, tiny even, careful. All those hours, all that care. And for what? The clock on the wall ticked loud and steady. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's dog barked, then silence again. I sat down at the table and looked at the sweater. It was beautiful. It really was. And Lily had wanted it. But her mother didn't. That's when something inside me, something I didn't even know had been waiting, shifted. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something older than that. A kind of quiet reckoning. I had spent so many years being helpful, being thoughtful, being careful not to be in the way. And I was tired. I folded the sweater again, this time slowly, like it mattered. Then I reached for the notepad in the drawer, the one I use for grocery lists and birthday plans. On the top, I wrote one sentence. No more giving where there's no welcome. Then I tore the page out and pinned it to the fridge. Tomorrow, I would begin something new. But tonight, I would just sit here, alone in my own home, and let myself feel the truth of what had been said. Not just in words, but in tone, in silence, in all the times I'd been passed over. And I would not forget it. It snowed all night. Not the pretty kind, but heavy and wet, sticking to the windows like the sky didn't know when to stop. I watched it through the kitchen curtain, still in my housecoat, holding the same cup of tea I'd reheated 3 times and never drank. My neighbor across the street, Lorraine, was out scraping her windshield. She waved, and I nodded back, not moving. She didn't ask questions. She's good like that. Just leaves soup on my porch some nights, says it was too much for just me. By 10, I'd finally changed into real clothes, the same jeans I've worn since they still made things to last. A flannel shirt, wool socks, and I packed away the sweater. Not to hide it. I wasn't ashamed, but it didn't deserve to sit on the counter like a forgotten item. I slid it into the drawer where I kept my yarn, laid it right on top. I don't know why, but it felt like the right thing. Then I walked to the back of the house, to the room I used to call the boys' room. It still smelled faintly of pencil shavings and old linoleum. That's where I kept the paperwork. I sat down at the little desk and pulled out the metal box. Inside, receipts, photocopies, statements, the just-in-case pile. I didn't look through everything. I didn't need to. I knew what was there. The down payment I'd made on their house 7 years ago. Just a leg up, I'd told them. They'd said they'd pay me back once things stabilized. I never asked again. The checks I wrote for Lily's preschool, the ones Karen had mailed me articles about. Montessori builds empathy. These schools create leaders. I'd wanted to help. Still do, in some quiet corner of me. But help can't be demanded, and respect can't be purchased. I found the folder with my bank details. I stared at it for a long time, fingers resting on the edge like I was afraid it might bite. Then I picked up the phone. "Hello, this is Helen at Valley Union Savings. How can I help you today?" Her voice was young, breezy. I imagined her in bright nail polish and thin glasses. I cleared my throat. "Yes, I'd like to temporarily suspend automatic payments. All of them, please." There was a pause. "I can help with that. May I ask what kind of payments?" "Family support," I said quietly. "Mortgage supplements. School fees. Credit cards in my name for their emergencies. All of it." Another pause. This one longer. "Of course, Mrs. Hensley. Do you want to come into the branch or shall I flag it for review now and finalize it later in person?" "Flag it now," I said. "I'll come tomorrow with ID and everything else. I'll need a few security questions." I answered them without hesitation. Then I sat, listening to her tapping away. When she finished, she asked gently, "Would you like us to contact the account holders?" "No," I said. "Let them call me, if they notice." I hung up before I could change my mind. Then I took the little slip of paper with the reference number, folded it, and slid it into my recipe box between the chicken casserole and the peach cobbler. There's power in keeping things where only you can find them. The house was still quiet. I stood in the hallway, unsure what to do next. I could have gone back to knitting. I could have watched TV, the way I do when sleep won't come. But I didn't want distractions. I wanted air. I pulled on my boots and coat and walked outside. The air hit me like truth, sharp, cold, honest. I walked slow, careful not to slip. The neighborhood was hushed. the kind of silence only fresh snow brings, like the world was waiting. At the mailbox, I found a holiday card from the Johnsons, 3 flyers for carpet cleaning, and 1 pale blue envelope with no return address. My name was written in child's handwriting. I took it inside, placed it on the kitchen table, sat down. It was from Lily. Inside was a drawing, crayons on construction paper, a girl in a pink sweater, smiling. Above her, written in shaky letters, "Thank you, Grandma." No mention of her mother, no apology. Just that. I held it to my chest and sat there. Still. My eyes stung, but I didn't cry. I was tired of crying alone in the kitchen. Instead, I pinned the picture to the fridge, right next to the note I'd written the night before. No more giving where there's no welcome. But maybe, just maybe, there's still someone who sees me. The thing about silence is that it starts as comfort and ends as weight. I went 3 days without a call. No one from their house, no emails, not even a question about the canceled payments. Not even from my son. That told me everything I needed to know. I used to tell myself they were just busy. Jobs, child, obligations. But busy people still find time for what they care about. A phone call takes 90 seconds, a message even less. And people who love you, they don't let the silence stretch so long it starts to choke. I stood in my kitchen on the 3rd morning, looking at Lily's drawing, her pink sweater. I hadn't realized until now. The smile she'd drawn looked just like mine. Slight. Left corner raised just a little higher. I used to do that when reading to her, and I missed her. Fiercely. But I didn't miss the rest of it. The waiting. The apologizing. The way Karen made me feel like something outdated. I went to the hall closet, pulled out the old photo album. The one with the leatherette cover, the frayed edges from Lily's baby hands flipping too hard. I sat at the table and opened it slowly. First page. My husband and I, 1980. His arm around me, our son just a baby on my lap. We were in front of the old trailer back then, all dirt road and sunlight and borrowed chairs. Flip. Our son in 2nd grade, holding a trophy almost as big as his torso. He cried because he thought he'd lose, I whispered aloud, remembering. He always cried when he thought he'd lose. I was the one who stood beside him, all those nights he refused to sleep before tests. Karen hadn't even met him yet. Flip. Us at the community fair, 1997. I was holding a pie. First prize. It was the only blue ribbon I ever got for baking. I'd kept it in a box with his kindergarten drawings. I wondered now if he even remembered that day. The way he clapped for me louder than anyone else. I closed the album slowly. When did the clapping stop? The phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. For a second, I thought maybe it was one of Karen's friends, calling to scold or shame me for stepping back. It was my lawyer. "Mrs. Hensley," he said, "just following up. Did you still want to proceed with those changes to your estate documents?" I looked at the refrigerator, at Lily's drawing, then I looked at the recipe box. "Yes," I said, "I do. Would you like to meet in person or start by email?" "In person, and I'd like to bring a revised list of beneficiaries." "All right," he said, and I could hear the way his tone changed. A woman who shows up in person, who knows what she wants. I hung up. Then I took a blank sheet of paper and sat down again. Name by name, I made the list. It was shorter than it used to be. I kept Lily. I added a line for the shelter downtown, the one that teaches sewing and job skills to women starting over. I'd taught there, years ago. Quietly. No one in my family ever asked about it, and I never brought it up. I added another line for the quilting circle I'd joined at church. Most of those women lived alone. Most of them gave more than they got. And for the first time in years, I didn't add my son, not out of spite, out of clarity. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was just choosing who to pour into. The doorbell rang mid-afternoon. I peeked through the side window and saw Lorraine standing there, holding a small tin. "Banana bread," she said when I opened the door. "You looked tired the other day." I probably was. She handed me the tin and stepped back. "You know," she said, "I saw your son's wife at the grocery. She looked straight through me like I wasn't there." Cold? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. "You doing okay?" Lorraine asked after a pause. "I think," I said, "I'm doing the most okay I've been in a long while." She smiled. "Good." When she left, I made a cup of tea and sat with the banana bread. I didn't rush. I didn't think about them calling or not calling. I just sat. With my name. With my list. With my own company. And it was enough. I drafted the letter 3 times. The first version was polite, careful, too careful. "I hope you understand my position." No, I thought. They never understood anything I didn't explain in full sentences, then repeat again like I was reading from a cue card. The second version was angry. "You've taken and I've let you." That one felt better, but it also felt like shouting into a locked room. No one listens when they've already made up their minds. The third version was short. No defense, no bitterness. Just this. "Dear Mark, I hope this finds you well. I wanted you to know I've made some changes. Financial, legal, personal. I don't expect anyone to agree, but it's time I began living by my own values, not someone else's approval. Please don't reply in anger. There's no battle here. I'm simply stepping back from patterns that have drained me. If Lily wants to visit, she's always welcome. My door is open to love. It's just closed to transaction. Take care. Mom." I folded the page carefully, slipped it into an envelope, but I didn't seal it. Because some part of me, maybe the old, hopeful part, didn't want to send it at all. I left it on the mantel, beneath the photo of Mark as a toddler in overalls, clutching a plastic hammer. He used to follow his dad around with that thing, determined to help. If you'd told me then that one day he'd speak to me through clipped emails and forwarded messages from his wife, I wouldn't have believed it. That night, I sat in my recliner with a book I'd read a dozen times and didn't turn a single page. I kept thinking about Lily, about how kids notice everything, about how quiet disappointment teaches them to mute their own feelings. She was watching her mother that day, watching me, watching the silence between us, the forced smile, the sweater that never got touched. Would she remember it? Would she someday stand in her own kitchen, wondering if it's too late to unlearn what she absorbed? I wanted her to know something different. I stood up, found my old camera, the one with the cracked viewfinder, and took a picture of the sweater. I laid it on the table, smoothed it out, placed one of the acorns so it caught the light. Then I sent the photo to the print shop downtown. Next morning, I picked it up and bought a simple frame. Nothing fancy. Just wood, matte finish. I placed the framed photo next to Lily's drawing on the fridge. A reminder that what I made was real, that it mattered, even if it was dismissed, even if no one clapped. The letter stayed where it was for another day. Then, on Friday morning, I walked it out to the mailbox. I stood there for a long moment, envelope in hand. Then I didn't mail it. Instead, I tore it in half, then in half again and again, until the pieces were soft in my hand like snowflakes. I dropped them into the compost bin, watching them land among onion skins and coffee grounds. Because I realized something. I didn't need them to understand. I didn't need closure served on a plate. I'd already made the change. And if they called, if they wanted to talk, I'd listen. But I wouldn't explain myself again. I hadn't meant to call the bank again so soon, but on Saturday morning, I woke to a voicemail from Karen. 2 words. Call me. No hello, no explanation, just a sharp edge wrapped in syllables. I didn't call back. Instead, I stared at my phone for a while, then made oatmeal the way I like it. Thick, with salt, not sugar. I'd stopped making it that way when Lily started visiting more. She likes it sweet, Karen had said, as if preferences had only one direction. At 10, I picked up the phone and dialed the bank. Valley Union Savings, this is Rebecca. A different voice this time. Warmer, older, maybe close to my age. Good morning, I said. This is Martha Hensley. I'd like to move forward with closing all the supplemental accounts. She didn't ask why. She just confirmed my identity and read me the list. Mark's secondary credit card, the tuition draft authorization, the recurring mortgage overage transfer. Each one, I said. Yes. Close it. Would you like to be notified if he tries to reactivate anything? No, I said. I'd just like peace. There was a pause. Then kindly, we can do that. After the call, I went to the small box under my bed, the one I hadn't opened in years. Inside, a small stack of Lily's old drawings, faded photos, 2 baby socks I'd crocheted when Karen was still letting me bring things to the house. At the bottom was the card Mark had sent me after his wedding. I unfolded it. Thanks for everything, Mom. Couldn't have done it without you. There was no note from Karen, just a typed signature from the printer. I stared at the words for a long time. Everything. That was the problem. I had done everything. The cooking, the checks, the support, the silence. I had poured and poured until there was nothing left in me but a vague ache. No more. The next call I made was to the town library. Mrs. Hensley, are you still interested in teaching sewing again? I think I am, I said. If there's space. There's always space for you. I hung up, then stood in the hallway, right between the kitchen and the room where I'd once kept a cradle for Lily's naps. The walls still bore faint marks from the rocking chair I'd moved so often. That night, I got another message. From Mark this time. Hey, I heard you've been making changes. Can we talk? I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, because I was finally letting the silence work for me too. I hadn't spoken to a lawyer in years, not since Richard passed. He always handled the forms, the signatures, the official words that made my eyes swim. But now, it was just me, and I was learning that solitude could be a kind of clarity. Francis Whitlow still had the same office, same leaning filing cabinet, same window with the stubborn shade that never quite rolled up straight. He'd aged, of course. Hadn't we all? But he still had the kind of handshake that made you feel like the room wouldn't collapse, no matter what you brought into it. Mrs. Hensley, he said, pulling out a yellow notepad. What can I do for you today? I took a breath. I need to update my will. He blinked slowly, then nodded. All right. Any major changes? Yes. I handed him the list, short but precise. I've removed Mark as primary beneficiary. I'd like the remainder of my estate to be divided equally between the community sewing program and a trust I want set up in Lily's name, but not one her parents can access. Francis raised an eyebrow. You want to establish a restricted trust? Yes, until she turns 25. Earlier, only under certain circumstances, education, housing, emergencies, but no parental control. She'll inherit my house too, if she wants it." He didn't ask why. That's one thing I'd always liked about him. He worked with widows. He knew when stories didn't need to be spoken to be understood. "We can make that happen," he said. "I'll draft a preliminary version by next week." "And I want to write a letter," I added, "to go with it. Not a legal one, a personal one. Something she'll read when she's ready." "Would you like help composing it?" "No," I said. "That part has to come from me." Back home, I pulled out the good stationery, the kind I used to keep for Christmas letters and condolences. I hadn't touched it in years. Then I sat at the kitchen table and wrote, "My sweet Lily, if you're reading this, I'm no longer around to explain things in person. I hope you remember my kitchen, the smell of cinnamon, the feel of wool between your fingers. I want you to know something I didn't always say aloud. You are allowed to be different, to choose soft over shiny, to say no, to say enough. This house is yours if you want it. These funds are yours when you're ready. But more than that, I hope you remember that you were always loved for who you were, not what you wore or who you impressed. Keep the kindness. Keep the quiet strength. And if the world ever tells you handmade isn't enough, show them what hands can make. Love always, Grandma." I folded the letter slowly, pressed it flat, and slid it into the envelope marked "Private for Lily." Then I placed it in the drawer with the framed photo of the sweater. It wasn't revenge. It was realignment. I wasn't erasing my son. I was just stepping out of the role he'd written for me long after the ink had dried. I hadn't been to the church basement in nearly a year. The last time was for a potluck after Ruthie's funeral, everyone bringing casseroles and standing awkwardly near the punch bowl, unsure how to fill the silence she'd left behind. Ruthie had always filled silences with gossip and ginger cookies. Now the room just echoed. But today it smelled like cinnamon again, and strong coffee, and the faint, warm scent of old wood and yarn. The quilting group was smaller than it used to be. Age thinned the ranks, and bus schedules weren't kind to joints that didn't bend like they once did. But the ones who showed up, they still stitched like it mattered. "Look what the cat dragged in," Bernice called from across the room, her voice cracking on the edge of a laugh. "More like what the wind blew in," I answered, unbuttoning my coat. "You come to stitch or just drink our coffee?" Margot asked, raising her brow over her glasses. "Little of both." They made space for me without ceremony. That's what I loved most about women like them. No false welcomes, no performative affection. Just one scoot of a chair, one push of a basket to the side. I brought out a bag of soft wool I'd dyed months ago, still rich with color. Plum, pine, soft ash. I hadn't known what I'd use it for until this week. We worked quietly, as quilting circles often do. Needles tapping, scissors snipping, the occasional sigh from a back too long in the same chair. The silence was companionable. I didn't need to explain why I was there, why I hadn't been before, or why my stitches were tighter than usual. But Margot spoke eventually. She always did. "Heard from your son lately?" "No." No one asked more. They didn't need to. After a while, the conversation shifted to the upcoming church bazaar. "We need more items," Bernice said. "Last year's scarves didn't sell well." "What about small throws?" I offered. "Lap blankets, but beautiful ones. Something comforting." "Like your peach sweater?" Margot asked without looking up. I paused. "You heard about that?" She snorted. "This town's not that big, Martha, and Karen's not that subtle." I didn't respond. I just threaded another length of plum yarn and began the border. "Make a few for the shelter table," Bernice added. You always had an eye for color. I nodded, surprised at how easily the yes came. It felt good to say yes to something that gave, not just took. Afterward, I walked home slowly. The wind had picked up, biting at my cheeks, but I didn't mind. My coat was warm, and my hands, though stiff, were steady. When I got home, there was a note on my porch, a real one, folded and tucked under the potted ivy that hadn't quite given up on summer. It was Lily's handwriting. Grandma, I'm sorry about Mom. I miss you. Do you think maybe I could come by sometime soon? Just us? I want to learn to knit. I won't tell her if you don't want me to. Love, Lily. I sat down on the steps and held the note against my chest. She remembered, not just the sweater, but the me inside the sweater. I didn't go inside right away. I just stayed there a while, the cold creeping through my socks, the wind tugging at my collar. Because some moments ask you to sit with them, to feel them fully, to let the pain breathe, and the hope too. And in that stillness, I thought, maybe I was never meant to be boutique. Maybe I was always meant to be stitched. I waited a full day before answering her note, not because I needed time to think, but because something about her words, just us, made me want to slow down and hold the moment gently, like the first snow you don't want to step on yet. I wrote her back with a pen that scratched slightly, my favorite one with blue ink and a soft grip. Dear Lily, of course you can come by. I'd love that more than anything. I'll teach you whatever you want to learn, knitting, baking, mending buttons, planting herbs, whatever strikes you. No need to keep secrets, but I understand if you need quiet space right now. You always have that here. We'll start with something simple. Wool in your favorite color, tea with honey, and a good chair to sit in. See you soon, sweetheart. Love, Grandma. I folded it, tucked it into an envelope, and the next morning I walked it down to the bus stop near her school. I knew which driver she had, the same man who used to let her pull the little cord to signal a stop when she was 5. Can you give this to Lily Henderson? I asked. She sits by the window halfway down. He smiled, took the envelope, and nodded. She still pulls the cord even when it's not her stop. That made me laugh. The old way, with the chest, not the throat. The next afternoon, I heard the knock. Gentle, hesitant, but it was her. She stood there with a small backpack and flushed cheeks, looking at me like maybe I'd change my mind. I didn't. Come in, I said. I've got yarn and cinnamon bread. She smiled wide, stepped inside, and kicked off her boots without being asked. She didn't ask about the house, didn't comment on how it smelled like beeswax and lemon cleaner. She just looked around and said, I missed this place. And that did it. I had to blink fast and move to the kitchen to keep the tears from showing. We started with soft gray wool. She liked the feel of it. Like clouds, she said. Her hands were clumsy at first, like all beginners, but she didn't get frustrated. She just kept asking questions. What if I mess it up? Then you unravel and start again. Doesn't that waste it? No. Yarn forgives. She smiled at that. Do people? Some do. She didn't ask more. Later, while the bread cooled, we sat on the floor and looked through the old button tin. She sorted them by color, by size, by number of holes. These are prettier than the ones in stores, she said. They've lived longer, I said. That night, when Mark texted asking if she'd come home for dinner, she looked at me, unsure. I didn't say anything. I just handed her the phone. She typed slowly, then showed me before pressing send. Still at Grandma's, learning. No apology, just truth. He didn't reply. She stayed until the sky turned deep and the lamp by the window cast that soft amber circle around us. When she left, I gave her a small bundle of yarn and 2 knitting needles tied with twine. "For practice," I said. She hugged me tight. Not the fast kind kids give when they're told to. The kind where they stay still for a minute and breathe near your neck. When the door closed behind her, the house felt full again. Not loud, not busy, just full. I stood by the window and watched her walk down the street, the bundle under her arm, and I realized I didn't need anyone else's version of family. I had mine. She had me. I used to love Christmas, not for the shopping or the music or even the food, though I did make a cranberry cake that got requested every year. I loved it because of the wrapping, the small rituals, the way you chose something, tucked it into paper, folded the corners just right, and said, "I see you. You matter to me." But this year, no one had asked if I was coming. No invite, no call, not even the polite, "Just so you know, we're keeping it small this year." So I made different plans. I got out my small artificial tree, the one I'd once used in my classroom before I retired, and set it up by the window. The light still worked. The star on top leaned slightly to the left, but I didn't mind. I always liked things that didn't pretend to be perfect. Then I pulled out my basket and started wrapping. Not for Mark, not for Karen, but for the shelter down the hill. For the women who'd left behind things much heavier than sweater snubs and silence. I made 5 hats, 3 scarves, 2 small cardigans with wooden buttons, and I wrapped each one with a tag that said simply, "Warmth." From one woman to another, I placed them all into a paper bag and walked them over myself. The building was quiet that morning, staff bustling inside, no time for pleasantries. But one young woman at the desk looked up and smiled when I placed the bag down. "For Christmas," I said. She opened it, touched the yarn, and her eyes widened just a little. "These are beautiful," she said. "Did you—" "Yes. People usually bring used coats or dollar store mittens. These were made for someone specific," I said, "even if I don't know her name." She didn't ask more. She just said thank you, and I left. On the walk home, it started to snow. Fat flakes, falling slow like feathers. And I thought, this is Christmas. Not being invited. Not sitting at a table with people who'd rather you were a story they told than a woman they knew. This. Making something with your hands and giving it to someone who doesn't expect it, but needs it anyway. When I got home, I found a small envelope tucked into the mailbox. No stamp. No address. Just my name. Inside, on thick cream paper, was a note in Karen's handwriting. "Martha, I know things have been strained. I suppose I should have handled the sweater differently. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, though I imagine I did. I'm writing because Lily keeps asking to see you, and I know she went over there last week, even though we didn't talk about it. I'm not trying to start anything, but I'd appreciate it if you let me know when you see her. That's all. No apology, no warmth. Just control. Still trying to manage what she couldn't contain." I didn't respond, because I wasn't asking permission anymore. That evening, I placed one last box under my own little tree. Inside was a book, Lily's favorite, the one with the girl who makes clothes for animals. I'd found a used copy at the thrift store and added a handwritten note inside the front cover. "May you always make, give, and wear what feels true." On the tag, I wrote, "To Lily. Love, Grandma." I didn't know how I'd get it to her yet, but I would. The call came late, later than it should have, later than polite people usually dial. I was already in bed, my book open on my chest, the lamp still on because sleep hadn't shown up. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I picked up. Mom. His voice was tight, like he'd been rehearsing for hours and still didn't have the lines right. I said nothing. We noticed some issues with the bank. Still, I said nothing. Silence can be an answer too. I tried to pay the January tuition installment and it bounced. Then the utilities. Karen checked the cards. Everything's frozen. His breathing crackled on the other end. I just wanted to understand what's going on. I sat up slowly, pushed the book aside, and turned off the lamp. I assume you got my letter? I said calmly. There was a pause. I got something, but it was vague. I didn't realize you meant this. No, I said. You didn't realize I meant it at all. He exhaled. Mom, listen. I know things haven't been perfect between us, but this feels like punishment. It's not, I said. It's a boundary. There's a difference. I don't understand why you're doing this now. After all these years. Because I finally understood something, I said. That silence isn't peace. That giving everything doesn't buy love. That waiting for kindness from people who only call when they need money is no longer how I want to live. He didn't answer. You didn't invite me to Christmas, Mark. You didn't even call. But you remembered the tuition draft. That's not fair. No, I interrupted. It is. You and Karen made it very clear where I stand. I'm simply stepping where I was placed. Outside. Lily misses you, he said suddenly, softer. She talks about you all the time. I know, I said. She wrote to me. You've been seeing her. She's been visiting. On her own. Another pause. Then, Karen didn't know. She's upset. She doesn't get to decide, I said. Lily's old enough to choose who she wants to learn from. And I won't stop her. His voice shifted again, from defensive to pleading. Mom, I know we haven't been close, but cutting us off like this, it's cold. I almost laughed. Cold? I'd sat at countless holiday tables where my presence was treated like a formality. I'd watched Karen smile with closed eyes and clenched teeth. I'd seen my gifts set aside like misplaced relics. I gave for years, Mark. Without condition, without complaint. But you didn't just take money. You took comfort. You took presence. You took a mother and turned her into a sponsor. That's not true. It is, I said, steady. And you can be angry. You can tell yourself I'm bitter or dramatic. But deep down, you know. You know how little space you left me. He didn't speak for a long time. I could hear the hum of something in the background. Maybe the fridge. Maybe the sound of his own disappointment catching up to him. Finally, he said, So what happens now? You live your life, I said, and I live mine. We don't owe each other silence or performance, but I won't be your fallback anymore. I didn't mean to make you feel, I know, I said, and this time I softened just slightly. But meaning well isn't the same as doing well. He exhaled again. I should go. Yes, I said. You should. And then I added, Lily's still welcome? Always. He hung up. No goodbye, no apology. Just the click of a line that had been stretched too far for too long finally snapping. I sat there in the dark, my hands cold, my breath slow. And for the first time after one of his calls, I didn't cry. January passed in a strange hush, not the sad kind, the clean kind, like snow after it stops falling, when everything's still and new and waiting. I started sleeping better. I woke without the heaviness I used to carry before my eyes even opened. My steps were lighter, my meals simpler but warmer. I cooked what I wanted, when I wanted. I stopped making enough for leftovers, just in case someone drops by. No one dropped by, except Lily. Every Friday after school, she'd come, always with the same eager face, the same chilled cheeks, the same deep sigh of relief when she stepped into the warmth of my kitchen. We kept knitting. We talked about her school, about her books, about the unfairness of gym class and the magic of fresh snow. She never mentioned her mother. I never asked. One afternoon, she looked up from her stitches and said, "You seem different lately, Grandma." I smiled. Maybe I finally remembered who I was. She nodded, as if that made perfect sense. That same week, I started something I hadn't done in years. I enrolled in a workshop at the town library. Creative mending and textile reuse. Tuesday nights, 6 p.m. I walked in that first night with a small bag of old linens and the quiet nerves of someone re-entering a room they used to know. The room smelled like fabric glue and eucalyptus. There were 6 of us, all women. 1 young, 2 about my age, 3 older, 1 in a wheelchair, another with hands that trembled slightly as she threaded her needle. No one asked where I came from. No one asked who my family was. We just started. We learned how to patch jeans in ways that made them art, how to turn torn curtains into reusable bread bags, how to stitch flowers over stains. Nothing wasted, the instructor said. Only transformed. I wrote that in my notebook. Nothing wasted. Only transformed. After class, I walked the 3 blocks home with a light step and something close to joy blooming in my chest. The next morning, I opened the old cedar chest in the spare room, the one that held decades of scraps I'd always meant to use. I sorted, I folded, I remembered, and I began sewing again, not for need, not for anyone's praise, just for the joy of making. Later that week, the mail brought a small envelope addressed in a child's handwriting. Inside was a card Lily had made in art class, construction paper, a lopsided heart, glitter sealed under tape, and 1 line written in green marker. "I love coming home to you." I sat down at the table and read it again, and again, because that's what it felt like. Not rebellion, not revenge, but homecoming, not to a house, to myself. I was reaching for a jar of pickles when I heard her voice. Karen. At first I wasn't sure. The grocery store was full. Saturday afternoon, everyone's stocking up before the next storm. But then I heard it again, clipped and low, 2 aisles over. No, they're the wrong ones. I said almond milk, not oat. I stood frozen for a moment, hand on the shelf. I hadn't seen her in person since before Christmas. Everything between us had come in the form of implication, message, or silence. Seeing her now, in the wild brightness of the dairy aisle, was like bumping into a stranger who knew your secrets. I didn't want a scene, so I turned toward the opposite aisle, hoping to loop around to the checkout. Too slow. She saw me. I heard the heels first, then the deliberate voice behind me. "Martha." I turned slowly. She looked just like she always did. Hair precise, coat expensive, eyes sharp. "Karen." There was a pause. Then, lightly, "It's been a while." I nodded. "It has." Another pause. Then she crossed her arms. "I suppose we're pretending this is normal now? The separation?" I blinked. "You mean boundaries?" She frowned. "You've hurt Mark." "You know that." I didn't flinch. "I know he's confused, but he's also an adult and responsible for his own choices. You froze his cards, canceled Lily's tuition support, cut us off without a word. I wrote a letter. Barely." I took a breath. The hum of fluorescent lights above us felt suddenly loud. The cold from the open fridge at my back was seeping through my sweater. "You made it very clear, Karen," I said quietly, "that there was no space for me. Not in your house, not at your table, not in Lily's life, until she forced her way in herself." Her face stiffened. "I never said that. You didn't have to. You said it with your eyes, with your tone, with every 'we wear' boutique and every closed door. People passed by, carts squeaking, unaware that something was unraveling in aisle 7. "She's just a child," Karen said, suddenly softer. "She doesn't know the full picture." "She knows love," I said. "She knows warmth. She knows who listens when she speaks." Karen's voice dropped. "She's been different lately, more distant, more opinionated. I know you're encouraging it." "No," I said. "I'm just not discouraging who she is." There was a silence between us then. Real silence. Not hostility, but something heavier. The sound of two women realizing they were never going to agree on what mattered most. Finally, Karen said, "I suppose I can't stop her from visiting you." "No," I said. "You can't." She looked like she might say more, but then she just adjusted her coat, turned, and walked away. I stood there a while longer, my hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, from the strength it takes not to apologize for being right. I checked out without incident. Walked home through snow flurries, the sky dull and low. When I stepped into my warm kitchen, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I took off my coat, lit a candle, and set a kettle on the stove. Then I wrote a single sentence in my notebook, under today's date. It costs a lot to keep the peace, sometimes more than it's worth. She came just after dusk, with the wind behind her. I didn't expect her, not on a Tuesday, not without a note, not with the week still heavy and school still in session. But there she was. Lily, in a red knit hat and snow-dusted boots, cheeks pink from cold, eyes wide and quiet like the evening sky. I opened the door and she stepped inside without a word, dropping her backpack softly by the wall. "I needed to come," she said. I nodded. "You hungry?" She nodded back. I reheated soup and cut bread, poured milk, sliced apple. The kind of meal that isn't fancy but says, "I'm here. I'm listening. You're safe." She didn't speak much while eating, just slow bites and small glances at me, as if confirming I was real. After she finished, we sat in the front room, where the lamp by the window gave off a gentle glow. I picked up my knitting, and she did too. Still clumsy, still unsure, but with that same quiet determination she always had. "I told Mom I was going to a friend's," she said, eyes on the yarn. I didn't scold her. I just said, "I'm glad you came." She paused. "It's hard at home lately." I waited. "She's mad all the time." "About school? About me? About you?" I set my knitting down. "Did she say anything to you? About here?" Lily shrugged. "She said you're being difficult, that you're teaching me to be stubborn." "And what do you think?" She looked up at me, small and serious. "I think you're teaching me to be strong." I swallowed hard. She told me the sweater made us look poor. My chest ached, slow and sharp. "It made me feel warm," Lily added. "I wore it in my room when no one could see." I reached across the space between us, touched her hand lightly. "You don't have to hide the things that feel good to you," I said. "Not for anyone." She nodded, lips pressed together. Then, hesitantly, "Could I stay the night?" I hesitated. Not because I didn't want her. I did, with every part of me. But because I knew what kind of storm it might stir. Still, she had come. And she was asking. And I would not be another door closed. "Call your father," I said. "Tell him you're safe, that you'll be home in the morning." She dialed from the kitchen phone, voice low and fast. I didn't listen in, but I saw her shoulders stiffen, then drop. When she returned, she just said, "He knows." That night, I made up the old bed in the guest room, the one she used to nap in as a toddler, the one with the worn quilt and the little lamp shaped like a bear. She brushed her teeth with the backup toothbrush I'd always kept, just in case. Before she went to sleep, she stood in the doorway, bare feet on the wood floor. "Grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "I don't think I want to be like her." I didn't say she had to love her mother or forgive her right away. I didn't say family is complicated or that someday she'd understand. I just walked over, brushed her hair from her face, and said, "Be like you." She nodded, then climbed into bed, pulled the blanket to her chin, and whispered, "This feels like home." The knock came early, too early for someone polite. I was still in my robe, the kettle just starting to hum, the sky outside a soft gray that hadn't decided if it would bring sun or snow. Mark stood on my porch, no jacket, just a sweater, thin and wrinkled, hair uncombed, hands in his pockets. Behind him, his car idled in the driveway. I could see Lily's backpack in the back seat, but not Lily. I opened the door but didn't step aside. We looked at each other for a long moment. "She's inside," I said finally. He nodded. "I figured. She's fine." "I know." We stood like that, neither of us moving. Then he said, "Can I come in?" I didn't answer right away. Then I stepped back, just enough for him to pass. He walked in slowly, looking around like the place was smaller than he remembered. Or maybe it was just that he'd grown into someone who didn't belong here. "She's still asleep," I said. He nodded again, eyes on the floor. "I don't want to fight," he said. "Then don't start one." He sat at the kitchen table without asking, like he used to. Like when he was 10 and mad about something at school, but couldn't quite say what. I poured 2 cups of tea and sat across from him. He didn't touch his. "I didn't know how far things had gone," he said. "Between you and Karen. I thought you were just being distant. I was being erased." He looked up. Every time I brought something, she rolled her eyes. Every word I spoke was met with polite silence. Every gift, every visit, every moment filtered through judgment. He said nothing. "And you let it happen," I added. Still, he said nothing. "I tried to make peace, for Lily's sake, for yours. But peace isn't real when one side is constantly shrinking." He rubbed his hands together slowly. "I was afraid," he said finally. "Of what?" "Of being caught in the middle." I nodded. "You were. And instead of choosing truth, you chose ease." He swallowed hard. "She's not easy to live with." "That's your choice, but don't expect me to keep paying the toll for your decisions." He looked like he might argue, but then he leaned back and stared at the fridge, at Lily's drawing, at the photo of the sweater, at the quiet evidence of a life he no longer knew. "She's changing," he said. "Lily. She stands up to us now. She questions everything. She's growing," I said. "She says you make her feel seen." I smiled, faintly. "Because I do." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the boy in his eyes, the boy who once cried over a broken toy, the boy who made me a lopsided clay mug and called it a forever cup. "I don't know how to fix it," he said. "It's not yours to fix," I said. "It's yours to see, to own, to decide what kind of man you want to be next." He lowered his head, nodded once, then softly, "She wants to come here more. She's always welcome." He didn't argue. Instead, he stood slowly, walked to the front room, and waited while Lily gathered her things. When they left, he didn't say goodbye. But at the edge of the porch, he paused. turned back, and said, "Thank you for not turning her away." I closed the door behind them and leaned against it. No victory. No neat resolution. But something had shifted. Not enough to rebuild what we lost, but enough to know where I stood now and who stood with me. Spring came slowly that year, not in a rush of blossoms or birdsong, just in small signs. Thinner frost on the window panes, the return of light in the late afternoons, the soft crackle of thaw beneath the garden's soil. I started opening the windows again, just a little, just enough to let the air change. Lily still came every week, sometimes twice. She'd bring half-finished knitting and questions about the world that startled me in their sharpness. Why do people pretend to be nice when they don't mean it? Why don't adults say they're sorry more often? Why do moms get mad when you don't want to be exactly like them? I never gave her perfect answers, but I never told her not to ask. We planted herbs in the back garden: basil, thyme, mint. I taught her how to bury eggshells near the roots for strength, how to know the difference between a weed and a sprout. Some days we didn't speak much at all. We just sat on the porch, each with a cup of tea, each with our own thoughts. And it was enough. One evening, she brought a bag with something wrapped in tissue. "I made you something," she said. Inside was a scarf. Crooked in places, a few stitches too tight, others too loose. But it was soft, and warm, and hers. "I wanted it to be the same color as the sweater," she said. I wrapped it around my neck and didn't hide the tears that came, because that scarf was more than a gift. It was a return. Later that month, I got a card in the mail from Mark. Just a few lines. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot. About you. About how much you carried that I never really saw. I don't expect anything, but I want you to know I'm trying. Thank you for keeping the door open for Lily. And for me, too. If that's ever something I've earned again. Mark." I read it once, then twice. Then I tucked it into the same drawer where I kept Lily's early drawings and my folded will. I didn't write back. Not yet. Some bridges take time, but I didn't close it either. One night, Lily and I sat on the back steps, watching the sun dip low. She leaned against my shoulder and said, "I think I'm going to be a maker." I smiled. "You already are." She looked up. "What about you, Grandma? What are you now?" I thought for a moment. Then I said, "I'm someone who stopped asking to be chosen and started choosing myself." She nodded like she understood, and I think she did. So here I am now, older, steadier, and not quiet in the same way anymore. Not erased, not waiting. And if you're reading this, maybe you know what that feels like. Maybe someone once made you feel small for being soft, or ashamed for making things with your hands, or invisible in rooms where you gave everything and got silence in return. If you've ever folded yourself smaller to fit into someone else's comfort, unfold now. Stand up. Pour into the ones who see you. Make the soup. Knit the sweater. Keep the letter. Open the window. And if this story reminded you of something you once lost, or something you just reclaimed, leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs to remember they're not alone. Let this be your warmth, too.